Today's story is a little different from the stories we usually bring you. Some of you may have visited a casino before, while others may never have set foot in one. When we think of casinos, we usually think of the people who go there to gamble. But there are also the employees who run the games, the dealers. The protagonist of today's story, whom I'll call Dolson, was a casino dealer. For privacy reasons, I'll be leaving out the specific country and locations mentioned in today's story. Dolson has been a long-time friend of mine. She studied casino-related subjects at university and began working as a dealer after graduating. She initially worked at a foreigner-only casino in South Korea. Then, through an unexpected opportunity, she was offered the chance to work overseas. One day, an older female colleague from the same industry contacted her. "Dolson, there's a new casino opening in Southeast Asia. They're looking for a Korean manager, and the conditions are really good. Why don't you come with us and join as one of the founding members? You could establish yourself there from the very beginning." It was definitely an offer worth considering. But naturally, Dolson had her doubts. She was a young woman traveling to a country she knew very little about. She didn't know what the local security situation was like, and she worried about what might happen to her if she went there alone. Still, the offer was extremely attractive, and the benefits were hard to ignore. So she thought, they say you should experience hardship while you're young. Maybe I should just give it a try. And with that, she boarded a plane and left for a Southeast Asian country known for its tourism and nightlife. She wanted to earn money and build up her career. And since being a casino dealer wasn't necessarily a job she could do forever, she also thought that maybe she should take the opportunity to make a substantial amount of money while she was still young. So, with a mixture of excitement and anxiety, Dolson arrived in that country. Although she had some concerns deep down, the place she arrived at was a truly magnificent casino located inside a luxurious hotel. At the time, the casino itself had not officially opened yet. They were still in the process of preparing for the grand opening. Everything was extremely well organized, and the security team was also highly professional. Seeing how properly everything was set up, Dolson began to feel reassured. She thought, "Oh, this really is a legitimate, well-run place." Dolson signed a 3-year contract and began working as a full-time contract employee under exceptionally favorable conditions. Compared to what she could have earned in Korea, the terms were incredibly attractive. She started working under these conditions and, over the course of about a year, adapted perfectly to the job. She even worked her way up to a management position and was doing very well. She was especially becoming a seasoned professional at dealing with customers from all kinds of different countries. As her experience grew, she continued working at the tables as a dealer and gradually became more comfortable with both the job and life abroad. And then, one day, she met a Korean man named Dolby, who appeared to be in his early 30s. Apparently, being a casino dealer was a much more emotionally demanding job than most people realize. Customers who lost money would often take out their frustration on the dealers. And when it came to attractive female dealers, there were also plenty of people who would openly harass them sexually or try to assert dominance over them. So when Dolson first met Dolby, she thought, "Oh, he's probably just another annoying customer." He kept talking to her while playing. "Oh, you're Korean, right? I heard you speaking Korean earlier. How long have you been working here? What do you do after work?" He kept throwing out what you might call typical pickup lines. But Dolson had already been working in the industry for quite some time. She had seen plenty of customers like this before, so she simply thought to herself, "Oh great, another weird gambler," and just laughed it off. But there was something different about Dolby compared to the other men she had encountered. He kept coming back to the casino every 2 or 3 days, and on some days, he would come in every single day. Now, according to casino dealers, you can usually tell when someone is truly obsessed with gambling. There is a certain look in their eyes. They don't look quite normal. But when Dolson looked at Dolby, he didn't seem to have the eyes of a gambling addict. At the same time, he was what you might call a too much information kind of person. He was constantly talking about himself. He would say things like, "Hey, don't get the wrong idea about me. I'm not a gambler. I work here as a guide, and I just really enjoy meeting Korean people, so that's why I keep coming over to talk to you." These days, I often bring VIP customers here and help get them excited about the games, so that's why I come here so often. Don't think badly of me, and I don't even bet that much." And when Dolson looked at the situation, it was actually true. He wasn't betting large amounts of money. He seemed more like a laid-back guy who came to the casino just to chat with the dealers. As they kept seeing each other and talking face-to-face over and over again, the boundaries between them gradually began to blur. Technically, she was still a dealer and he was still a customer. But little by little, that distance started to disappear. And then, one day, a decisive incident took place. Dolson had days off from work, of course. One day, she decided to take a break from everything and went shopping in a busy downtown area nearby. She deliberately chose what you might call a more local shopping mall, somewhere Korean expats didn't usually go. She said she generally avoided places frequented by tourists because she didn't want to run into casino customers outside of work. Since she could potentially run into people she had seen at the casino, she usually went out of her way to find more local shopping areas instead. But while she was there, she unexpectedly ran into Dolby. When Dolson saw Dolby, he was dressed very casually, almost like someone who actually lived in the area. He looked completely comfortable, and he was talking on the phone. The moment he spotted Dolson, he recognized her. "Oh wait, aren't you the casino dealer? Wow, what are the chances of running into you here? It's so good to see you." He walked over to her with a big smile. "I actually just finished work. If you have time, would you like to grab something to eat together?" He approached her in a very friendly and casual way. And when you meet someone you know while living abroad, it can feel surprisingly exciting. You tend to feel especially happy to see someone familiar. Also, seeing Dolby outside of the casino made him seem completely different from the slightly slick, overly confident man she had seen while he was gambling. Outside of work, he just seemed like a friendly older brother from the neighborhood, a genuinely nice guy. So Dolson started thinking, maybe he really is just someone who works in the same area. Maybe I was being overly suspicious. Besides, while living and working abroad, the only person she could really open up to about her personal life was the older Korean colleague she worked with. She was also feeling lonely. She missed speaking Korean and being around someone who understood what it was like to live and struggle in a foreign country. So she thought it would be nice to sit down, speak Korean freely, and just talk with someone from home. And that was how the two of them ended up having dinner together. As they continued spending time together, Dolby turned out to be exactly 1 year older than Dolson. He had simply looked older than his actual age. But as they began talking about more personal things, Dolson found him surprisingly mature and easy to talk to. Before long, the two of them began developing a relationship that was somewhere between friendship and something more. After that, whenever their days off happened to coincide, they started meeting outside the casino several times. Dolson also noticed that Dolby was extremely considerate. He never crossed any boundaries or tried to take advantage of the situation. Instead of trying to assert himself or dominate the relationship, he listened to Dolson's struggles and worries about living abroad and gave her advice, treating her like a dependable older brother. Before long, Dolson even began to think, maybe I could actually give this guy a chance. Then, one day, Dolby suddenly called Dolson. "Dolson, I finally moved into my new place. After living as a guide and renting for so long, I finally got out of the rental cycle. I found a really nice mansion and even bought a place of my own," he said, sounding proud. Then he asked, "Hey, when are you off this week? If you have some free time, I'd love to have you over for a housewarming dinner. I'll even cook something delicious for you." By this point, Dolson had already started developing feelings for Dolby, so without any suspicion, she happily replied, "Sure, I'd love to come." Until then, Dolson had been imagining all kinds of romantic possibilities in her head. So when she finally arrived at Dolby's place, she was surprised to find that it was incredibly clean for a man living alone, and the food was beautifully prepared as well. It didn't look like something he had simply bought and brought home. It looked as though he had actually cooked everything himself and carefully set the table for her. The two of them had dinner together and shared a few drinks, and as the atmosphere became more relaxed, Dolson finally let her guard down. But there was something strange about what happened next. Dolson had worked as a dealer for a long time, and because of the late-night nature of the job, she was used to drinking quite a lot. She was actually someone who could handle alcohol very well. But that night, after only 1 or 2 glasses of wine, she suddenly felt the room spinning. It wasn't simply a matter of her getting drunk. She described it as a sudden blackout. One moment, she was sitting there drinking wine, and the next, she had completely lost consciousness. She had no idea how much time had passed when Dolson suddenly opened her eyes. The reason Dolson woke up was because she felt an intense thirst. Her throat felt completely parched, as if it were burning from the inside. Her head was throbbing painfully, as though she had been struck with a hammer. She could barely force herself to sit up, and when she finally opened her eyes, Dolby was nowhere to be seen. She wasn't in the room with the sofa where they had been drinking earlier either. Instead, she realized that she had been moved to another room and was lying there alone. But the room didn't seem to be properly soundproofed. As Dolson sat there, trembling in fear, she could hear faint sounds coming from somewhere outside. At first, she couldn't make out what they were. Then she heard something. A voice. A man's voice. And it sounded like he was talking to someone. Dolson froze. She didn't know where she was. She didn't know where Dolby had gone. Her phone, shoes, and bag were all missing, and she was lying in a strange room that looked nothing like the living room where she had been drinking wine just a short while earlier. The more she listened, the more clearly she could hear the voices outside. And then suddenly, she heard Dolby's voice. Just wait a little longer. That was the moment Dolson realized something was terribly wrong. She had no idea how long she had been unconscious. She had no idea what had happened while she was asleep. But one thing was certain. She had not simply passed out from drinking. Something had been done to her, and whatever Dolby was planning to do next. She was trapped inside his house with no phone, no shoes, and no way to call for help. Outside, she could hear someone talking on the phone. When she listened carefully, she realized it was Dolby. But he wasn't speaking Korean. He was speaking fluent English. Dolson wasn't in a normal situation. She knew something was seriously wrong, so she pressed her ear against the door and listened carefully. Dolson wasn't very good at English, but she could understand enough of what was being said. She heard Dolby saying things like, "Don't worry, she is real." Then something about a real Korean dealer. She could also hear him saying that she was very young, in her 20s and so on. But the words that really stuck in her mind were, "Price is fixed, no discount." The moment she heard that, everything suddenly clicked. The price for a Korean dealer in her 20s. Oh my God, this is a kidnapping. Only then did she realize what was actually happening. From the circumstances, it was clear that Dolby had kidnapped her. Dolson hadn't been his love interest at all. She had been the merchandise. But Dolson still couldn't tell whether this was simply some kind of personal connection or whether Dolby was working with other people. While she was sitting there, overwhelmed with fear and trying to figure out what to do, she suddenly heard one decisive sentence. "Okay, 1 hour. Bye. 1 hour." She heard him clearly say that he had 1 hour. 1 hour. 1 hour. She realized that someone was coming in an hour. That meant she had exactly 1 hour left. Whether I escape or do something to get out of here, I have to make my move within this 1 hour. If I'm going to run, or if I'm going to do anything at all, I have to figure it out now. She was crying as she desperately tried to think. But she couldn't make a sound. If she made any noise, someone might hear her. It could be Dolby, or it could be someone else. So she bit down hard on her lips and began desperately looking around the room. You know those cheap motels where there's a bed and a small table in front of it with something like an ashtray sitting on top? There was an ashtray on the table, but it wasn't an ordinary ashtray. It was made of incredibly thick glass, almost like crystal. You know how, in movies, someone gets hit over the head with a heavy glass ashtray and is knocked unconscious? Dolson looked at it and thought, "That's it. That's the only thing I can use as a weapon." She picked up the heavy glass ashtray and held onto it. Then she began thinking, where should I stand? How can I stop a grown man? Let me add something here that I left out earlier. Dolson was about 163 centimeters tall and weighed somewhere in the 50-kilogram range. She was a very slender woman. Dolby, on the other hand, was over 180 centimeters tall and weighed more than 90 kilograms. There was only one way she could possibly fight him. She had to strike him in the head, so she carefully moved the table to the side of the door opposite the hinges. Then she climbed onto the table. She knew that if she screamed, Dolby would come running into the room, and that would be her only chance. So she stood on top of the table, right beside the door, holding the heavy glass ashtray. Then she took one deep breath, and with every ounce of strength she had, she screamed, "Ah!" From outside the room, Dolby cursed and shouted, "What the hell?" Then he suddenly threw the door open and rushed inside. But Dolson had actually thought the whole thing through. Normally, when you open the door to a bedroom, the bed is right there in front of you. If there was no one in sight, Dolby would naturally turn around and look elsewhere. So Dolson had gathered part of the blanket and arranged it so that it looked as though someone was lying underneath it. Dolby rushed over and pulled the blanket back. And just as he was about to turn around, Dolson jumped down from the table. With all her strength, she swung the heavy glass ashtray and made contact with him. Thud! Dolby let out a scream and collapsed to the floor. She didn't even stop to see whether there was blood or what had happened to Dolby. I've got to get out of here. If I don't escape right now, I may never get another chance. That was the only thought in her mind. She ran out of the room, and thankfully, this wasn't some isolated warehouse or abandoned building. It was a residential building used by local people, something similar to an apartment villa in Korea. When she looked to the side, she saw the entrance immediately, and thankfully, the front door only had a simple lock on the handle. Thank God. She unlocked it and burst outside. She was barefoot, and her entire body was drenched in sweat and cold sweat. As she rushed down the stairs, she lost her balance and tumbled down them. It was only about 2 floors, but she went rolling down the staircase. Then she finally burst out of the building. The cool night air rushed over her. It was already nighttime. She looked at the time, and thankfully, she wasn't in some isolated location. She was in a normal residential neighborhood, a complex of apartment buildings where ordinary people were still coming and going. She just ran. She ran straight ahead without knowing where she was going, desperately trying to find a taxi. When the taxi driver saw Dolsun, she must have looked incredibly suspicious. A woman with no shoes, completely drenched in sweat, looking terrified. But Dolsun had only one thought in her mind. I can't trust the police. I need to get to the casino. The only people she felt she could trust and talk to were the employees at the casino. So she shouted, "Kasliz, please! Please!" The taxi driver could tell that something serious had happened, so he took her to the casino. When she arrived, she immediately called over one of the security guards. After working there for an entire year, she recognized many of the security staff. And when she saw a familiar security guard in uniform, she finally felt at least a little safer. That was how Dolson managed to escape from Dolby. Once she reached the hotel lobby, she was so overwhelmed that she nearly collapsed. At first, she almost fainted and fell to the floor. But even then, one thought remained in her mind. I have to catch Dolby. If he gets away, I don't know what will happen to me. She knew she had to report everything to the police. Thankfully, there was a security guard who had worked with her before. They had become somewhat close, and over the course of that year, he had even learned a little Korean. Let's call him Young. Dolson immediately asked for Young. Bring Young here, please bring him here. When Young arrived, Dolson explained everything. She told him roughly where she had been held and what had happened. Please call the police. Send the police here. If we don't catch that man, I don't know what might happen to me. But she also had another fear. What if I actually killed him? She had been the victim, But from another perspective, she could potentially have caused serious injury to him. So she was worried about what might happen if Dolby had been seriously hurt. The police were called, and thankfully, Dolby was arrested right there. He wasn't in life-threatening condition, but the shock of the incident must have been enormous. The police arrested him immediately. And then, through the local police investigation, the truth about Dolby's identity began to come to light. Dolby really was a tour guide, but he also had another side to him. He was a professional broker. But what kind of broker was he? Among some people who become obsessed with gambling, especially those who gamble overseas, there is a strange superstition. They believe that if they sleep with a casino dealer and somehow take the dealer's luck for themselves, their own luck at gambling will improve. It's a bizarre belief, but apparently, some people genuinely believe it. And there was an even more unusual aspect to this particular case. She was a foreign dealer. I heard that foreign dealers often handle larger value chips than local dealers. The scale of the games they work with can be completely different. Because of that, spending a night with a foreign dealer was considered more valuable and therefore more expensive. It sounds completely absurd, but there were apparently people willing to spend enormous amounts of money to sleep with a dealer because they genuinely believed in this superstition. Until then, Dolby had acted as a broker, connecting that kind of demand with its supply. But because there were no Korean dealers in that particular area, he decided to try to make a much bigger profit. And that's when he targeted Dolson. During the police investigation, Dolby reportedly claimed, "This was really my first time. She looked so innocent for a dealer that I thought I would just do it once." He also said that because it was his first time, he didn't even know how much of the drug to use. He apparently used far less than he should have, thinking that amount would be enough. In fact, Dolby had no prior criminal record, and this was apparently the first time he had ever committed a crime like this. The place where the crime took place was the floor directly above Dolby's apartment, the upstairs unit in the same building. That apartment had been used as a place to hold people. Listening to this story, I couldn't help thinking, what if Dolby had actually been a professional criminal? What if he had been part of an organized group? What would have happened to Dolson then? Thankfully, Dolson survived and was eventually able to return safely to Korea. After that incident, Dolson struggled with a deep fear of men for quite some time and underwent trauma therapy for a long period. These days, she has completely left the casino industry. She now works at a Hold'em pub, where she has been able to settle down and build a more stable life. And that is the story I brought you today. The story of someone who, while living abroad, ended up being most afraid of a fellow Korean.